The general's voice cracked like thunder. "Stand. 2. Attention." No one moved. No one understood. Every head turned toward the source. A towering figure in full dress uniform, metals catching the harsh fluorescent light. His voice carried the weight of command, the kind that could silence artillery fire. But now it hung in the stale air, unanswered. Rows of dignitaries froze mid-conversation. The civilians looked confused, their brows knitting. Not a single person moved, except for a woman at the far back bent over a mop bucket, gray hair pulled into a tight knot, faded apron tied over a plain uniform. Her hands stilled on the mop handle. She didn't look up. Not yet. The general's gaze swept over the room, sharp as a blade. "I gave you an order," he said again, quieter this time, but far more dangerous. They didn't know what he meant. The command he barked wasn't in English, nor French, nor any language the guests recognized. It was clipped, old, from another time. It carried a weight that spoke of frozen nights and burning deserts, of soldiers who obeyed before thinking, because hesitation could mean death. And in that thick, baffled silence, the cleaning lady moved. She straightened. The mop clattered to the floor. Her chin lifted, spine rigid. In a single, precise motion, she turned to face him, boots clicking. Together, shoulders squaring in a posture too perfect to be an accident. Her eyes locked on his, unwavering. Then, with slow, deliberate precision, she brought her hand up in a salute so sharp it could cut glass. She had been invisible to them just moments ago. The woman who wiped the floors before dawn, who emptied bins no one wanted to touch, who faded into the background whenever speeches were made. They knew her only as Marta, always polite, always quiet, always on time. But the general, he knew that salute. He knew it down to the exact angle of her wrist, the tight line of her jaw. It wasn't the salute of a casual parade ground soldier. It was the salute of someone who had stood before life and death and chosen discipline over fear. The room, sensing something they didn't understand, fell utterly silent. Years ago, she was Captain Marta Iliev of the 4th Rapid Response Battalion, a woman whose boots had crossed minefields, whose voice had calmed terrified recruits, whose hands had carried wounded men to safety under fire. She had commanded respect not through rank alone, but through the unshakable calm she carried into chaos. In winter campaigns, she remembered the taste of metal in her mouth from breathing in sub-zero air, the way snow would soak into the seams of her gloves until her fingers went numb. Yet still she held her rifle steady. In the desert, it was the opposite heat, so intense it pressed on the skin like a weight, the smell of gunpowder mixing with dust. She buried friends. Too many. Faces she could still see when she closed her eyes. At night, a laugh frozen mid-sound. A half-finished sentence never completed. She learned to stand straight in the aftermath of loss, because grief was heavy, but so was the responsibility of the living. When the war ended, the uniform went into a trunk, medals wrapped in cloth. The world had no need for soldiers like her anymore, or so it thought. The economy broke apart, and finding work became a daily battle of its own. Eventually, she took the janitor's job because it was steady, and because steady meant survival. She told no one about her past. It was easier that way. People liked their heroes shiny and untouched. They didn't want to know that sometimes heroes mopped floors to afford bread. Now, in this hall, the man in uniform, the general, was not a stranger to her. She had seen him once before, decades ago, on the field. He had been younger then, his face unlined but already carved by responsibility. She remembered the sound of his voice in the cold, calling out the same command he had just barked, now a command given only in moments of dire urgency, one that cut through chaos and fear alike. Around her, the well-dressed guests glanced at each other, whispering. Some smirked, assuming the general had lost his mind. A few rolled their eyes, dismissing the cleaning lady's sudden stiffness as some kind of act. The general, however, stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His boots rang against the polished floor. His expression was unreadable. When he stopped before her, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "Marta Iliev," he said, finally in a language they understood. "Is it you?" She did not answer right away. Her salute lowered only after she had held it for the precise number of seconds tradition demanded. "Yes, sir," she said at last, voice low but steady. The weight in those two words shifted the air. Around them, people began to understand not fully, but enough to feel the gravity of what they were seeing. The general turned to the crowd. "You stand," he said, voice hard, when someone like her enters the room. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. One by one, the guests rose, chairs scraping the floor. The smirks were gone now, replaced by something else, something close to shame. Marta's hands were still rough from years of work. The scent of cleaning solvent clung to her apron. Yet, in that moment, none of it mattered. She stood taller than any metal in the room. "I'm just a cleaner now," she murmured, not to diminish herself, but as a simple truth. The general shook his head. "There is no just in a soldier who has carried the weight you have. You wear no uniform, but your honor has never left you. Some ranks can be removed from a sleeve. Others are carved into the soul." It wasn't a ceremony. There were no cameras, no planned speeches, but the silence that followed felt ceremonial nonetheless. It was the kind of silence that carried respect raw, unfiltered, and earned. The general reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered patch, the insignia of her old battalion. He pressed it into her hand. Her fingers curled around it instinctively, as though it belonged there still. Uniforms fade. The oath does not. The onlookers didn't know exactly what had passed between the two veterans, but they understood enough. This wasn't about nostalgia or sentiment. It was about recognition, the kind that doesn't ask for permission or need a stage. The general saluted her, the gesture crisp and deliberate. Marta hesitated only a moment before returning it, not as a janitor, but as the soldier she had always been. When the moment broke, it was not with applause, but with something deeper. People approaching her quietly, offering handshakes, some even bowing their heads. The kind of respect that cannot be demanded, only given. She returned to her mop bucket eventually, but her posture remained a fraction straighter. And though she never sought attention, the next time she entered the room, people stood without needing to be told. The loudest kind of honor is the one kept in silence. In the days that followed, whispers traveled. Some researched her name, finding fragments of history, citations for bravery, commendations for leadership, records of missions classified even now. Others simply remembered the sight of a woman in a faded apron, standing tall under the weight of a general's gaze. In a world quick to measure worth by titles and appearances, it is easy to overlook the quiet figures who walk among us. But sometimes, the greatest heroes are not on the stage or in the spotlight. They are the ones who have already given more than most will ever understand and who ask for nothing in return. If this story reached you, share where you're watching from. Share it with someone who needs to remember that respect is not about position, but about what a person has carried through fire. And if you wish to hear more stories that honor silent heroes, you know where to find them.